Jamie.
And I'm Chloe.
Welcome to JCT News.
Today we bring an amazing segment involving the Iran hostage crisis.
But first, before we dive straight in, we must first look at the history on how the Iran hostage crisis came to be. Let's take it over to Jamie.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Jamie Rivers, and I'm here to give you the rundown of the Iran hostage crisis. It all started with something called the Cold War. In 1945, the U.S. was facing off against the Soviet Union, the two superpowers or strongest nations of that time. Iran was an ally of the U.S., allowing us to station troops in their country. However, trouble soon arose. Iran was having a revolution at the time against their leader Shah. Shah was known to be a cruel and vicious leader. He was resented by his people for being an anti-Muslim. He was executed and gassed many of his people and had a secret police force to terrorize them. This left the U.S. in a bad situation. Iran citizens then despised the U.S. for never helping them during this revolution, and it soon became a hatred when the U.S. allowed Shah to come into the country for treatment. This started the rivalry we have today.
Wow, what an extraordinary history. Now let's turn it over to Chloe with some of the leaders during this time.
Hi ladies and gentlemen, my name is Chloe Patrick and I'm here to tell you about the leaders during this time. Jimmy Carter was the U.S. president during the Iran hostage crisis. Jimmy Carter's presidency was ruined due to the failure to get the hostages out. Carter had tried to put pressure on Iran through economic sanctions and had frozen its assets. But then, on April 11, 1980, Carter also approved a high-risk operation called Desert One. This mission had sadly failed because of the manufacturing of the helicopters. Ultimately, it wasn't until Ronald Reagan was sworn in as president in 1981 that the 52 hostages were safely returned home to the U.S. Another leader during this time was the Iran leader Ayatollah Khomeini. He became the supreme leader of the Islamic Republic of Iran in 1979. He also was a leading member of the Shia Muslim group. Now let's send it back over to Tia.
What interesting facts on the leaders. Now let's move on to Tia with some of the hostages and reactions of the people when the Iran hostage crisis was going on.
Good afternoon, I'm Tia Maggio. On November 4th, 1979, 66 Americans were taken from the U.S. Embassy in Tehran. 52 of those hostages were held against their will for 444 days. One of these including Rocky Sickman, a Marine sergeant that was also abducted. He currently resides in St. Louis. However, some hostages were liberated before the 444 days due to being females, African American, or medical conditions. It wasn't until January 21st, 1981, the same day Ronald Reagan was sworn into as president, that the hostages were safely returned. This crisis shocked the nation and left many people vulnerable. I had the opportunity to interview Mark Giesing and Steve Reinecker, social study teachers at Sperring Middle School. Let's have a look. I'm here with Mark Giesing from Sperring Middle School, social studies teacher. Hi Mark, how are you?
I'm great, Tia. How are you today?
Yes, so first off, how old were you when this crisis was going on?
Well, Tia, I was in middle school myself at the time, and I think it was 8th grade probably when the Iranian hostage crisis took place.
Okay. What were your thoughts about this while growing up? I mean, it must have been tough growing up while having this weight on your shoulders.
It really was actually kind of scary because, we were growing up at a time when we kind of thought the United States was this invincible superpower, and I don't think I'd probably even heard of Iran before the Iranian hostage crisis. The next thing we knew, we've got these people holding Americans hostage, and I think for a lot of kids like myself, it was a real surprise that somebody we'd never heard of could have this kind of a power over us.
Mm-hmm. And as a child, was there one point where you were truly afraid you might be bombed?
Well, growing up in the Cold War, I think that a lot of kids my age, I don't think we were worried about the Iranians bombing us, but it did come about in a time period when there was great tension between ourselves and the Soviet Union. And yeah, a lot of kids growing up in the Cold War time period did worry about, nuclear bombs and ICBM missiles coming in from Russia and hitting us. So I remember as a kid, I wouldn't say I was worried about it on a daily basis, but it was definitely something that sometimes you thought about.
Mm-hmm. So how did this affect you as a child?
It was a scary time, and particularly the Iranian hostage crisis thing. I think we were all concerned how it would play out, and it didn't seem like there was any answer or solution. President Carter was not able to come up with one. They had a failed effort to try to free the hostages, and that was badly handled and ended up being a disaster. And I remember there was just a lot of pessimism in America, a lot of belief that we couldn't solve the problems, and people were really doubting that there was a good answer. And I think ultimately it's the main thing that cost President Carter the next election.
Well, I'd like to just thank you for allowing me to interview.
I'd like to thank you, Tia. As always, a pleasure.
Have a good day, sir.
Same to you, man.
I'm here with Steve Reinecker. How are you, Steve?
I'm doing good, thanks.
So first off, how old were you when this crisis was going on?
Well, 1979, I was 11 years old, and I remember it quite well.
What were your thoughts about this while growing up? I mean, it must have been tough growing up while having this weight on your shoulders.
Well, I'm from a small town called Sparta, Illinois, and I knew Mr. Sickman, not well, but I knew him, and he was cousins with one of my friends, so pretty much everybody in the town knew who he was. It was a pretty emotional time for all of us.
In case you don't know who Rocky Sickman is, he's one of the hostages taken during the Iran hostage crisis. So as a child, was there one point where you were truly afraid you might be bombed?
There was never a point where I thought it might be bombed. The only concern I had as a young boy was I remember that there was discussion about they maybe have a draft, and will my dad be drafted, taken away from a family? There was a lot of my friends felt the same way, but that's the one thing that really came to my mind about being worried.
So how did this affect you as a child growing up?
Well, I would say it didn't really affect me, not physically, but emotionally it did. I remember the whole town would worry about him and pray for him, and I remember that everybody would wrap yellow ribbons around our trees, hopeful that he would come home safely. And I can remember when we heard that he was, right after Ronald Reagan was elected president, that they brought him home, and we were so excited. I remember there was a big parade for him, and we were just thrilled to death to have him back.
So have you ever felt endangered?
Never once felt endangered, just worried about my dad.
All right. Thank you for allowing me to interview you.
You're quite welcome.
Now we'd like to take the time to remember those we lost during the Iran hostage crisis.
Well, that's all the time we have for today, folks. Join us next time at JCT News.